Hi and welcome.
Hi, Kanisha. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. I'm going to start the recording for our session. And welcome back. We are live at the top of the hour. I am here with Amy Schield. Amy Schield is a certified professional life coach who helps everyday people get out of their own way and move forward with confidence using neuroscience-based technologies. She helps clients overcome the fear of failure, self-doubt, and achieving their goals without any of that. So welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll turn it over to you to give us a bit of an introduction and your personal journey on how you've gotten here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. So as you said, I am a certified professional life coach. I wasn't always a life coach. And in fact, earlier in my life, I had a lot of struggles with self-confidence, self-esteem, to the point where I was actually just thinking a moment ago when I was in college about 20 years ago, I actually slept in my foundation, my makeup, because I didn't want other people to know that I didn't have clear skin. So I was struggling with a lot of perfectionism, which naturally brought my self-confidence down, brought down my self-esteem, to the point that I wouldn't even let myself try a yoga class because I was new to yoga. I had never done it before, and I just wasn't comfortable being new and not showing up as this perfect yogi who knew all the moves and had all the flexibility and that kind of thing. So since then, I've actually learned how my brain works and how to manage it to overcome that perfectionism, low self-esteem, build up my self-confidence. And now I have the absolute privilege of helping other people do the same.
And so I was having some tech issues on my end. Thank you for your patience on that. So a whole journey of your own, really getting to this place of this confident being and really stepping into life coaching, which is so powerful and confident all in and of itself. And so you do a lot with neuroscience-based technologies. So can you share with us about that, more about that?
Yeah, of course. So I don't actually use any technologies. I'm not that advanced, but I do employ neuroscience-based techniques, not only for just myself, in kind of my own journey of building self-confidence, but also with the folks that I work with. And what that looks like is a couple of different things. The first part is really understanding the different parts of your brain, how they function, and how to put them to work for you instead of against you. And so in the context of talking about building confidence, we have two parts of our brain. The first part is what I like to refer to as the toddler brain, because it behaves exactly like a toddler, right? And it has three jobs, which are to keep you safe, to maintain the status quo. So let's keep everything the same, and to expend as little energy as possible. And we'll talk a little bit more about the toddler brain, I'm sure, as we go through here, but now just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And then the second part of the brain that I focus on is called your prefrontal cortex. And it is responsible for things like executive functioning, future planning and thinking, decision-making, and emotional regulation. So those are kind of the two parts of the brain that we examine, that we look at, and that we utilize through cognitive coaching to help folks get themselves to where they want to be from a mindset standpoint. We also work on overcoming the pre-programmed reward system in your brain. So all those quick little dopamine hits that your brain likes from sugar, social media, being a couch potato, all of those kind of things, binge watching Netflix. So we work on that as well. And we also look at thoughts and emotions from an objective perspective, so that you get a look at, okay, what's going on in my brain and how's it impacting my life, so that you can kind of step outside of your own situation and see the forest for the trees.
Mm.
And then finally, we work on literally creating new neural pathways in your brain by practicing and building beliefs that serve you in whatever it is that you're looking to achieve.
Yeah. So let's jump into the actual beliefs, and there are so many beliefs that we have started to cultivate and are at a place now, especially in adulthood, that we weren't really born with. And so let's talk about beliefs, how we identify them and as our beliefs now, and really shift to address them, really.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, beliefs really are just thoughts that we think over and over. Um, they can seem really big and scary and hairy, but it's just a thought that we've been thinking either a whole lot for a short period or a lot over a long period. And kind of like a fish in water, until we are kind of triggered or prompted to start looking at our beliefs, a lot of times we don't notice their presence in our everyday lives because it's just kind of the worldview that we've built for ourselves. So again, it's like a fish in water. The fish has been swimming in the water its entire life. It has no idea that it's in water. And then beliefs are really important too, because they influence our choices. And whatever you believe about yourself, about your life, your abilities, good or bad, your brain is constantly scanning for evidence to confirm those beliefs because your brain loves to be right. So that's another important thing to know about the brain and beliefs. So in terms of kind of noticing the water as the fish and identifying your beliefs, there are some really great questions that you can ask yourself. And these are things like, what do I believe about myself? What do I believe about my life, about my past? What do I believe my past means about me? What do I believe that I'm capable of? And so just kind of having a little heart to heart with yourself, writing down the answers to those questions is a great way to get kind of a baseline of your beliefs and what they are. What are these beliefs that are driving your motivations, your decisions on a day-to-day basis? And I'll say too, when you're doing this, some people really want to write down the things that they maybe think they should believe about themselves versus what's actually going on in the noggin at that time. And that's kind of like going to the doctor because your knee hurts, but then, trying to walk around in the examination room and pretend like you're fine, right? So it's
Right.
really important when you're digging into your beliefs to be honest with yourself. And that's really an act of self-love and self-care for yourself, because you're saying, hey, look, this is where I'm starting from, so that and you're kind of shining a flashlight on where are we at right now.
Yeah. And I can see too, just in talking with people about their existing beliefs, that often there's this almost confusion of what they want to believe about themselves versus what they really do believe. Because it's almost as if that's the limiting belief that, man, if I say it out loud, if I place a name to it, then it makes it real, or I feel the shame or the guilt, the blame of however I developed that belief. And so it's really interesting that you point that out, and where the honesty really comes from naming the true feeling or belief that you have about yourself and where you're at. That's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned that in the context of talking with another person, because, with the social media highlight reel that we're all used to, where everybody is happy and confident and looks and feels great.
Yeah.
It can feel really vulnerable to admit to somebody, yeah, you know what? My self-confidence is really low. You know what? I kind of dog on myself a lot. And so we don't necessarily have to expose our beliefs about ourselves to other people, but for us, when we're examining, it's super important just to lay it all out barefaced.
Yeah. That honesty from within. I love that. And so so somebody goes through that process of really identifying those beliefs of themselves or of their life or whatever, right? So identifying those beliefs in the most authentic, honest way. when somebody realizes that those beliefs no longer serve them, how do we shift that? How do we get out of then that belief that we've been attached to?
So one of kind of the first steps in terms of breaking down a belief that you've identified that doesn't serve you is to find evidence, show your brain evidence of why it's not true. So remember a few minutes ago, I said your brain is constantly scanning for evidence to confirm those beliefs because your brain wants to be right. And if we serve something up to it that says, hey, brain, this is not true, then that triggers in your brain, okay, I need to question this belief. Maybe this isn't true. Maybe this isn't keeping me safe like I thought it had been.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is an opportunity for growth. So step one in this process is really just all about showing yourself, showing your brain evidence that it's not true.
Yeah. And it's so interesting that we're talking about this because that's been such a realization of mine throughout the years of how right my brain wants to be about the things that I do believe. So how powerful. So we have identified it, and then we realize the ones that don't serve us, and we start looking for the evidence. How do, as we create or identify the evidence that serves us, that, okay, there is this new belief, how do we start to really create the lens to continue seeing and gathering the evidence of what does serve us?
Yeah. So in terms of breaking down a new belief and shifting into something else, you really want to understand that, number one, you're not your thoughts or your beliefs, right? Your thoughts and your beliefs are sentences in your brain. They don't define you. Your successes and your failures don't define you. They're just sentences. And this is, honestly, I felt like I won the lottery when I found this out. It's so cool. Your thoughts are optional. Your beliefs are optional. Just because something pops up in your head doesn't make it true, doesn't mean that you have to buy into it, believe it, lead with that thought when you're making decisions for yourself in your life. So it's important to know that. And then second, you just want to get an objective perspective on those beliefs, right? So a great way to do this is to write down your thoughts or write down your beliefs around yourself or around if there's a specific issue that's getting sticky for you in your life, and then just walk away for 10 minutes, walk away for a few days, and then come back and read through that list as though it's somebody else's thoughts. And what that does is it places space between who we are as a person and what's going on in our head, right? Because like I said, you're not your thoughts. They're just sentences in your brain. And
Right.
So that's one great way to kind of gain an objective perspective on your thoughts. And you can also do this kind of creating space between your thoughts and yourself by just kind of tacking some phrasing onto the thoughts in your head. For example, gosh, I'm noticing that my brain is offering me the thought that I will never be able to run a 5K, or interesting, I feel this belief coming up that I'm reaching a plateau in my bench press, right? These kinds of things. And by saying, oh, my brain's offering me this thought, or I notice this belief coming up, we take some of the weight out of that, and we strip it of its truth in our minds so that it again becomes just a sentence that we can choose to buy into or not.
So today we have talked a lot about language and presencing language. And so I really love how you just phrased that our brain is offering us this belief. And again, another topic that we've talked about all day and really is the root to our confidence is our power to choose. And so I love how you really broke that down, in that the brain is offering you something to believe, and you have the choice to negate it or accept it. and you have the choice to then act, and what that action, that commitment is to, are you wanting to stay and recognizing that you're in that existing belief, or are you choosing to really create a new lens and see it with new evidence, right? That you might be able to press more, you might be able to go for that longer run, or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. And so kind of once you've identified that stinky belief that doesn't serve you, and found evidence for it not being true, and then kind of looked at your thoughts, the next step really is to decide what you want to believe instead.
Yeah.
Because again, your thoughts are optional, your beliefs are optional. And I mean, we get to believe whatever we want about ourselves. Right. Nobody generally tells us this, but it's true. And a great example is, like I just said, if I had a belief that I'm never going to be able to run a 5K. Okay, so let's just run with that as an example. Let's say what I want to believe is I could easily run a 5K, right? That's a big jump.
Yeah.
Physically and mentally for my brain, right? Not going to get there overnight. It's not like flipping a switch. And so what you can do to start actually shifting those beliefs in the direction you want to go is use what we call bridging thoughts. And bridging thoughts are kind of like stepping stones between the stinky, non-serving belief and the ultimate goal belief that kind of inch you closer and closer to what you want to believe. So for example, if my current belief is I could never run a 5K, I might start with a bridge thought that looks something like, I'm becoming a runner, right? Yeah. Easy enough to believe. If I went out and ran a block, hey, I'm becoming a runner. That feels believable for where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
And so then you would move on. Once that felt really true, you would move on to, I'm somebody maybe who enjoys running.
Yeah.
Like I used to think I couldn't even run a 5K, and now I'm actually enjoying running.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can build to, I'm becoming a 5K runner. And from there you go to, I could easily run a 5K. So shifting beliefs, I like to tell people it's a lot less like flipping a switch, and a lot more like turning a ship, right? It takes time because again, your brain has these neural pathways ingrained based on these beliefs that have kept you safe for your entire life thus far. And so changing that is something that doesn't happen overnight, but with effort and intentionality, it is so worth it.
I love that when you recognize how you have a choice of that it's like finding the gold at the end of the rainbow, like so empowering, so powerful. So let's talk about self-talk and that inner dialogue, which I'm sure just goes really hand in hand with the beliefs that we have, and why it's so important to understand what we're feeding ourselves and telling ourselves, and the impact that has on our confidence and self-esteem.
Yeah, absolutely. So self-talk is so important because the way we treat ourselves, the way we talk to ourselves, has a huge impact on our self-esteem. And for everybody that's watching or listening right now, I just want to encourage you to stop for a minute and imagine that another person is standing in front of you and they're telling you things like, you're not good enough, you always mess up, you're not going to be able to reach your goals, you should really be further along than you are. I mean, that wouldn't feel good, right? It would feel terrible.
Yeah.
But when we say those things to ourselves, from a psychological standpoint, from a self-confidence, a self-esteem standpoint, it has the same effect as though somebody outside of ourselves was saying it to us. And so in that sense, negative self-talk and highly critical self-talk is like mean girling yourself out of your goals and dreams.
And excuse me, where does that really start to come from? And I know that you talked about these different points of our brain. Where does that inner dialogue and that mean girl, mean guy chatter in our head, where does that really stem from? And when does that even begin?
That's a great question. And it comes from really a few different points. So part of it is kind of an evolutionary trait, again, from this part of the brain that I call the toddler brain. You may hear it also referred to as the lizard brain, the Cro-Magnon brain, or the primitive brain. I just like toddler brain because it makes me smile a little bit. But so part of this comes from your toddler brain. And remember, its three jobs are keep you safe, maintain the status quo, and expend as little energy as possible. So part of being safe, a few thousand years ago meant being socially accepted, being a part of the group, the village, the tribe, whatever the case was, not standing out, not being ostracized. And so part of our negative self-talk actually trends from the toddler brain, because the brain senses that it needs to identify our flaws so that we can fix them before anybody else notices. So 2,000, 3,000 years ago, when we were living in villages and really depended on one another for food, clothing, shelter, and survival, yeah, that was pretty important. 21st century society today, not nearly as important. The thing is, our brains just haven't evolved to that point yet. And then, of course, some of our self-talk can also stem from our social conditioning. If we got negative feedback at home or from school, unfortunately, some people had encounters with other kids at school that weren't positive interactions, bullying, that kind of a thing. And so sometimes we internalize that self-talk as well. So those are kind of just two places that negative self-talk can stem from.
Yeah. And so how do we stop and shift that, especially when it comes to how it's showing up as a limiting belief and the negative self-image that we've created even just within our own self? How do we stop and shift that?
So in terms of shifting from a negative self-image or a limiting belief, again, it's not like flipping a switch. It's more like turning a ship. And I will tell you, sometimes just awareness alone, like becoming aware of that water that you're swimming in, or becoming aware of that belief, sometimes that alone is enough to completely shift your perspective and change your life. So for example, let's say I'm just sitting here like hitting myself in the head, and Coach Kanisha says, "Oh, hey, Amy, you're hitting yourself in the head." And I say, "Oh gosh," right? As soon as I realize it, I'm going to stop hitting myself in the head. So sometimes with our limiting beliefs, that can be the case. As soon as we become aware of it, we're like, "Oh gosh, I didn't realize I've been doing this to myself. I'm going to stop immediately." Most of the time, though, those limiting beliefs are pretty deeply ingrained, and it will take time, effort, and intentionality to shift those in a more positive direction, the direction that we want to go. And just like fitness, managing your beliefs, building your confidence, shifting your self-image requires small forward steps on a day-to-day basis. But again, the results of doing that work for yourself are so worth it. Yeah. So in terms of how to actually make that shift, you want to challenge those old beliefs when they come up in your brain. And remember, the brain loves to be efficient. And so when it sees the issue coming up again, it's going to say, hey, I have the answer to this. We just talk mean to ourselves, right? It's going to want to run that script. And when those limiting beliefs come up again, you just want to challenge them, but you don't want to do it in a way that's self-critical. For example, you don't want to say, "Oh gosh, here I am again thinking I can't leave the house without makeup. I thought I'd gotten past this point, and clearly I've just backslid." You don't want to do that, but rather you want to challenge it in a loving way, and challenge it in a way that, again, frames it just as a sentence in your brain that's optional to believe. Hey, okay, all right, brain, I notice you're offering me this thought again that I shouldn't leave the house because I don't have makeup on. And I see what you're trying to do, but I'm safe. I'm going to be okay if I leave the house without makeup on. I'm not going to die. And really, nobody's probably going to notice that I don't have makeup on. And if they do, I don't really care. So you see how you're literally coaching yourself, talking yourself through, giving yourself evidence for that belief to kind of be invalidated. And it's taking that action on a day-to-day basis, just getting in the mental reps of pushing that belief kind of into irrelevance in your brain.
Yeah. And I can see that too. I mean, just so many things. Your example with, being able to actually finally see that you're actually punching yourself in the head, that visual cue, I can just see being so powerful for people that, okay, like there is something there that maybe I'm blind to at the moment. And when I get to recognize that and choose a different option, then I'll see even the different results or how that shows up. And just overall too, like really checking yourself, because it applies to anything. And I love that how we're doing it one way is really in all ways. How we show up in one area is how we show up in all areas. And so we've kind of talked about some ways to kind of reframe that mindset, but how do we really work to reframe the mindset to get out of our own way and channel any of those fears or limiting beliefs that we have into a productive, forward moving, kind of go for it attitude?
Yeah. So when we're talking about reframing the mindset to get out of our own way, to kind of address and overcome things like fear, overwhelm, it's really important first to understand why you're holding yourself back. So really digging into, again, the beliefs that we talked about earlier. What do you believe about yourself that's holding yourself back? Just so you're aware, right? Because it's hard to, it would be like trying to fix a car engine in the dark, right? I mean, you can kind of feel around and, you might stumble on the problem eventually, but if you can't see what's going on in your brain, in the engine, then you can't fix it. So make sure that you are aware, number one. A lot of times people get in their own way because they are afraid of failure, or they have this limiting belief that they're not capable of becoming the person that achieves their desired result, or they have a limiting belief that they are not capable of or don't want to put forth the effort that's going to be required to achieve their desired result. And in those cases, it's important to get really well acquainted with failure, to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable. Your brain, when it experiences fear, when it senses potential rejection or embarrassment, it shrinks away. The toddler brain wants to shrink away from whatever that activity is because it's trying to protect you, right? It's trying to protect you. It's like a 2-year-old standing in front of mommy saying, no, don't go down the water slide, kind of a thing, right? But it doesn't have the ability to consider the future consequences of whatever choices we make. So it's important to make it safe to fail. And a great way to do this is called the Dare of the Day. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but for 30 days, you do one thing a day that you're probably going to fail at. And the reason we do this is because it gets us comfortable with trying new things, trying things we're not good at, and trying things that, frankly, we're not probably going to succeed at, right? And that again gives your brain evidence that it's safe to fail, that if I feel uncomfortable or if I'm embarrassed or if I don't do well, I'm not going to die, because your toddler brain thinks that you're either going to experience grave bodily injury or you're going to die if, you have to have your spotter grab your bar at the end of a set, right? So just giving your brain that evidence and taking the time to build your cognitive muscles in terms of the way you view fear, and the way that you view those uncomfortable emotions. Instead of moving away from them, move toward them. If you're uncomfortable doing something, that means that you're moving toward growth.
Yeah. I love your distinguishing between comfortability, uncomfortability, and then how our brain wants to react in the safety, and where you can still be uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that we're going to be harmed. And you get to make the choice next time of, okay, how do we approach it this time? Or is that even something that's serving me to go after? But I've tried it. I know and I've received that evidence that I can in fact do it. Like it just so empowering. And I can see that really affecting confidence and the belief that you have in yourself to shift all of those limiting beliefs. It's really amazing.
Yeah. And I think, one of the really unfortunate things is that we're kind of conditioned to believe that confident people, don't feel uncomfortable, that they never feel afraid. And that is so not the case.
Not the
case. And when we're talking about overcoming limiting beliefs, shifting our mindset, being scared and doing it anyway, the goal really is not to eliminate fear. Because the only way to eliminate fear is to become a robot, because fear is a human emotion that every one of us experiences at some point. And so rather than try to eliminate the fear, the goal is really more to make sure that the part of your brain that's scared isn't the part of your brain that's making the decisions, which typically is the toddler brain is going to be the part that's scared. So the fear can be along for the ride, but they're not going to be the emotion that's driving the bus, right? And so taking action in spite of fear, what that looks like is, number one, just acknowledge that the fear is there. We don't want to try to ignore it or resist it or buffer against it with some other activity, because typically if we try to push it away, it just gets bigger, right? So
what we resist persists.
What's that?
What we resist persists.
Precisely. Yes. Yeah. What we resist persists. So just acknowledge that the fear is there. Like, okay, I'm about to go do this thing and I'm feeling a little bit scared. Drop into your body and notice the sensation that emotion creates, because emotions really are a sensation in your body. Okay, I notice my palms are a little sweaty and my heart's beating really fast and my voice is shaking a little bit. This is how I know that I'm scared, and just sit with it for a little bit. And once that fear passes out of your body, once you're able to process it, then you can start making decisions from your prefrontal cortex, like, again, who is the adult in the room, not the scared little toddler. And you get to move forward while still kind of like carrying that fear like a backpack, right? So it's not eliminated necessarily, but it's also not in charge of your brain.
Yeah. I heard something recently too, that fear and excitement actually have a lot of the same properties emotionally inside the body. We display them obviously different in the external or outward display of that emotion, but really learning that fear in and of itself is not necessarily what's going to hurt you. It doesn't have to be scary. And when we acknowledge it, and embrace it and name it, that we can actually shift that into an energy that is moving us forward and not something that is cognitively holding us back. So there's just so many facets to fear and how we can still move forward knowing that it's there. And so and fear kind of also goes hand in hand with overwhelm and self-doubt and self-sabotage. So what are some of the tips and tricks to kind of overcome all that encompassing fear and overwhelm and sabotage?
So my biggest tip in terms of overcoming those negative emotions like fear, overwhelm, self-doubt, self-sabotage is developing a rock solid relationship with yourself. And we have three selves really, past, present, and future self. And today I'll focus on present and future self. But so in terms of overcoming those, what we call negative emotions, overcoming limiting beliefs to take action, you want to start really thinking about your future self, the version of you who has already achieved that goal, right? So thinking from that person and taking action on behalf of that version of yourself. And it's really interesting because when you start to do this, you you start to almost self-mentor, and you unlock all kinds of knowledge in your head that has been trapped behind that fear and overwhelm and self-sabotage. So, if you're stuck or you're game planning for a goal, you think to yourself, okay, future me who has already completed this, what would she tell me right now? Especially if you're discouraged, right? What would she tell me right now? What are the steps that she took to get herself there? And another really impactful aspect of your relationship with yourself is taking action out of an act of love for yourself. So, for example, how is future you going to feel if she knew that you let fear stop you, or if you let overwhelm keep you from making a decision? How would your future self feel if she knew that you doubted her with that self-doubt, or that you sabotaged her?
Right.
You want to preserve and cultivate that relationship with yourself. And so when you're kind of at a crossroads between, okay, am I going to give into the overwhelm, or am I going to push through this toward that goal? Thinking about future you and your relationship with that person from a place of love is an incredible way to move past those kind of impasses that those emotions can create for us. And then also just loving your present self unconditionally, right? Loving yourself even if you fail, loving yourself even if you don't do as well as you wanted to, knowing that you're going to have your own back in how you think about the results that you create, regardless of what the results are.
Yeah. Which probably goes so hand in hand with perfectionism, and where we don't feel good enough and we have to always look good or have all of our shit together, and really show up as if there's nothing wrong or nothing missing. And so how do we change our mindset then on that too, and really just coming together as our authentic self, which is human?
Yeah, so perfectionism is interesting because it stems from tying our results to our self-worth, to our worthiness, and to our identity as a human. And perfectionists take any mistake or tiny misstep and they make it mean something negative about like who I am inside. And this, again, it ties back to the brain wanting to keep us safe and ensure social acceptance. But again, in 21st century society, it's not nearly as important as maybe it once was. So in terms of changing a mindset away from perfectionism, it's important to work on building a few beliefs, and that's that you're not your results. Imperfection is human, and I'm human, so we make a great pair, right?
Right.
You're also not your successes or failures, like I said earlier.
Yeah.
And your failures don't define you, and your successes don't either. At the end of the day, you are still the same Amy or the same Kanisha, right? And you are also whole, worthy, and complete exactly as you are. There's nothing that you need to do to be more accepted, to be more loved. You're infinitely lovable in this moment and always. And again, perfectionism and kind of untying it as a knot in your psyche is all about getting comfortable with failure. This is something that, I was a perfectionist for about 36 years and I was able to untie that knot. And I will tell you, not expecting perfection from myself is so freeing. I get so much more done. And it's crazy to look back now and think of how I used to hold myself to these incredibly high standards. But it just begins with, again, loving yourself, accepting yourself as you are. And we're turning a ship, we're not flipping a switch, but those beliefs can and will be built over time.
Yeah. And your example of your own experience made me think about too, because I have been there, and I still am in active practice of like not having to get it right all the time. And that when there is a mess up or something doesn't go as expected, like that is just human. That is what it is. But I have learned, especially recently, that I also hold others to just being human. And so the way that I even see others is with more respect and compassion and meeting them where they're at, because we all are human, and imperfection is what it is. Like, and it's all really meant to be. There's something to be said about how it all works out anyways. And so I really noticed that even in connection and relatability, like, it goes further when you give yourself that grace to show up then for all the people that are around you or that you come in contact with, which is so.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point. Most perfectionists who I have met are incredibly accommodating and forgiving and give grace to other people, and just expect them to be human, exactly like you said. And it's kind of a rules for thee, but not for me kind of situation, but like in reverse.
Yeah.
And my advice in that case is to practice self-compassion rather than self-criticism. You know, a lot of us, kind of like you were saying, we want to get it right all the time if we suffer with perfectionistic tendencies. And so rather than saying, oh, I missed this by, 5.5 seconds or whatever, if I'm running, rather than doing that, say, yeah, I missed it by 5.5 seconds and I'm disappointed. And it's okay that I'm disappointed. And it's also okay that I missed it, because that's just what I did today. And I love myself for trying. And guess what? I get to try tomorrow, right? That's a very different conversation than the self-critical conversation that stems from perfectionism.
Yeah. And I love to call it feedback. Like, it's just feedback. Okay. So like you said, tomorrow, all right, then I know that I get to be 5 seconds faster tomorrow when I put in the effort, when I take that committed action or whatever, right? Like, even if it's the weights, like, okay, then I get to lift my couple days a week that I choose to do. I get to lift for a couple more weeks and then try my PR again, or whatever that looks like. And not letting it be a block or limitation that happened.
Yeah. And there's definitely a way to give yourself constructive feedback that isn't demeaning or self-degrading. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And so we have kind of talked all about this safety, and you've given us such a great perspective on how our body inherently wants to, especially our toddler brain, wants to make us safe. But how do we subconsciously seek that personal safety that keeps us operating within just what we know and not really taking the risks or going all in or choosing, okay, I want to seek out the evidence that disproves the beliefs that I've held on to. And so kind of talk to us about that subconscious and where we choose to stay in that known.
Yeah. So, and you're exactly right. This is another example of the toddler brain coming into play. And safety is really important to your brain. So important that it has been pre-programmed from an evolutionary standpoint into our thought processes. And these thought processes in the toddler brain, a lot of times, are happening within nanoseconds. And we don't always necessarily even recognize that we're happening until we slow way down and actually look at the thoughts. But so in terms of personal safety and not wanting to kind of get into the discomfort zone, anything that this part of your brain, the toddler brain, perceives as difficult, dangerous, risky, it's going to view it as an unattractive choice. And it's going to start tossing a barrage of reasons at you as to why you should not go this route, right? And if it were up to your toddler brain, honestly, you would stay small, safe, and scared in your cave for the rest of your life, because that has kept you alive thus far, right?
Yeah.
But we know, again, from a 21st century standpoint, for where we're at as humans, that doesn't usually align with what we want to do. And again, our brain just hasn't evolved past that point. And it's probably a good thing that it hasn't evolved past that point, because, occasionally we are like teetering on the edge of a precipice or being chased by a bear. The more adventurous of us are doing that. I'm certainly not, and hope to never be in that situation.
Yeah.
But our brain can't distinguish between that kind of a situation and just expanding our comfort zone, right? It runs the same play anytime it senses fear, risk, lack of safety, danger, those kinds of things. And so it's really our job to manage that part of our brain using, again, our prefrontal cortex, to step in and keep us focused and on track toward our goals, keep us growing and evolving as an individual, so that our toddler brain doesn't, again, keep us small, safe, and scared in our cozy, miserable little cave kind of a thing.
I love it. The information that you've given us today is so helpful, really, to tapping into our own confidence and our core purpose, and really what's already inside of us. And something that has been talked about throughout this retreat today is that we don't need fixed. We're not broken. It's already inside of us. It's the lens that we're seeing ourselves. It's the lens that we're holding ourselves. It's the opportunities that we're choosing or not choosing. And so I love all of the information that you've given to us today. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I also know that you have something for the audience who is watching and looking at the replays today. What do you have for us?
Yeah, so thanks again for having me. I totally agree that every single one of us has everything that we need already inside of us. It's just about getting it out. And so thank you for having me. And what I have for the audience today is I would love to offer each person watching a free 30-minute focus coaching mini session. So they come and get to choose a topic and just get coached on it for 30 minutes. And I have the code. The code is Coach K for it. And I think that you're going to send out all the information for how to access it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So anybody who is watching, it's all going to be at the end of today. It's all going to be sent out in the email, all of the ways to reach out to Amy to get on board with that 30-minute session. You're not going to want to miss that opportunity with her. Take advantage of the time to bring forward something that has really been weighing on you, or something that came up during this conversation today with Amy, something that you would really like to get some support around in how you move forward with it, and what are some options for your individual situation in ways that you get to tackle that. So all of that information will be found in the email that's getting sent out to you. Again, thank you so much, Amy, for being here and offering that to our guests. I greatly appreciate all of the information and your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Kanisha. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you today and share this information with your audience. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I look forward to doing it again soon. Have a great rest of your day.
Same. You too.
Thanks. And so for everybody on YouTube, we are